The first time the alien commander saw a human soldier chew glass, he assumed it was a threat display. The second time, he realized it was lunch. Supreme Commander Threxeldar of the Vurek Dominion had traversed more than 100 star systems, negotiated ceasefires between species who communicated by spore cloud, and watched black holes tear moons in half like candy. Nothing had prepared him for Earth. His shuttle landed in what the diplomatic itinerary optimistically labeled Earth's premier military development complex. As the ramp extended and the scent of smoke, oil, and singed protein wafted into the cabin, Threxeldar's translator unit chirped an alert. Caution: unknown aromatic compounds detected. Origins: combustion, charred meat, and sugar. Threxeldar's dorsal frill twitched. A banner hung over the landing platform, sagging between two poles. Painted by hand in what looked like red spray paint, it read, "Welcome, Space Lizard. Enjoy the carnage." "I was told this was a formal inspection," Threxeldar muttered. Beside him, Ambassador Nrada of the Oalathai shook her translucent head. "It is. This is Earth's idea of protocol." A loud explosion cracked the air. Something that might have been a cannon, or possibly a firework duct-taped to a trash can, erupted near the gate. A cheering crowd of young humans in mud-streaked fatigues shouted unintelligible slogans. From the crowd emerged a compact, steel-eyed woman in a commander's uniform. She marched forward and saluted crisply. "Welcome to Forgepoint, Supreme Commander," she said. "I'm General Marianne Kincaid. I'll be your guide through the madness." Threxeldar stared at the soot on her boots, the torn edge of her sleeve, and the streak of dried blood, hopefully paint, on her cheek. He returned the salute, his claw clicking against his breastplate. "I had assumed Earth's military facilities were more organized." Kincaid smiled. "Oh, we're organized. We just organize chaos better than anyone else." The inspection began. They crossed the training fields under a sky bristling with surveillance drones and squawking birds. Cadets sprinted through obstacle courses involving electrified fences, barbed wire, and something called a death ditch. One cadet attempted to leap a trench and misjudged, landing chest-deep in what Threxeldar was informed was high-protein survival slime. "Is that part of the training?" he asked. "Oh no," Kincaid replied. "That's just Jerry. He made a bet." A nearby instructor, whose name tag read PUNC CHEMASTR, blew a whistle and screamed, "If you can't swim through slime, you can't swim through a war." Threxeldar began logging anomalies in his internal data recorder. Note: Earth training methods rely heavily on unpredictable environmental stimuli, low-fidelity simulations, and, oddly, humor. Unclear if deliberate or pathological. They entered the simulation hall next. Inside, a dozen cadets sat in low-lit chairs surrounded by glowing screens. The scenarios were chaos incarnate. Urban warfare with civilians armed with kitchen utensils, alien wildlife stampedes during hostage rescues, zero-gravity fistfights inside malfunctioning reactors. In one corner, a human yelled, "We're out of ammo, throw the toaster!" before hurling a chrome appliance at the screen. Threxeldar looked sideways at Kincaid. "Do your cadets ever engage in standard combat?" "Of course," she said. "After we've exhausted every non-standard method. That way, standard feels like vacation." A klaxon blared. The lights shifted to emergency red. A drill announcement scrolled across the wall. "Unexpected alien incursion. Escape with diplomat." "Perfect timing," Kincaid said, grabbing Threxeldar's arm. "You're the diplomat. Let's see how they handle pressure." "What?" Before he could protest, cadets came charging down the hall, escorting him through simulated smoke and sirens. One cadet threw him a helmet, another handed him a backpack full of bricks labeled "Vital Secrets," and someone shouted, "Move it, lizard!" They sprinted through mock hallways rigged with spring-loaded doors, slippery floors, and one alarmingly enthusiastic cadet pretending to be an alien berserker with a pool noodle and war paint. By the time they reached the extraction point, Threxeldar's frill was drooping and his translator was stuttering. "Simulation complete," an instructor yelled. "Casualties, 5. Mission success rating, 61%. Debrief in 10. Threxeldar removed the helmet with shaking claws. That was an assassination attempt." "Nah," said Kincaid, grinning. "That was just Tuesday." They moved on to the weapons lab. Here, things only became more concerning. One cadet was being fitted with what appeared to be an exosuit made entirely of tank treads. Another was testing a railgun that launched sharpened dinner plates. Threxeldar paused at a workstation where a human was attaching a flamethrower to a drone shaped like a duck. "This is not standard military hardware," he said. The engineer didn't look up. "Nothing standard if you're fighting in non-standard places, like sulfur swamps, or suburban Earth. You ever try clearing hostiles from a daycare without looking like a villain?" "I have not." The engineer gestured to a schematic titled, War Duck version 3.1, now with snacks. "This is why we win," Kincaid said beside him. "We aren't built for neat. We're built for possible." "Or suicidal," Threxeldar murmured. She laughed. "There's a fine line." Lunch provided no reprieve. The dining hall was filled with shouting, shoving, and laughter. Soldiers traded rations like poker chip. One was grilling what smelled like synthetic bacon on an improvised heating coil. Another cracked open something called an MRE challenge box, a meal ration stuffed with random components from 5 different armies across the galaxy. "Try this," Kincaid said, handing him a sealed pouch labeled, "Spicy Death Chili, do not eat indoors." Threxeldar poked it suspiciously. "This violates at least 3 coalition food codes. Probably 4. We're proud of that." He opened it. The scent singed his sinuses. He took one careful taste, and immediately his vision blurred. Internal cooling fluids surged through his veins as his body attempted to extinguish the fire now ravaging his digestive tract. A nearby cadet patted him on the back. "You only cry the first time. Builds character." When the coughing stopped and Threxeldar's translator resumed functioning, he leaned forward with bloodshot eyes. How does this help them become soldiers?" Kincaid pointed to a group of cadets arm wrestling while reciting combat strategies backward. "Because no matter how weird, how painful, how random, we teach them to adapt. You don't win wars by preparing for what should happen. You win them by surviving what does." The last stop on the tour was the Academy's Wall of Honor. It wasn't a wall in the traditional sense. It was a shattered steel slab pulled from the wreckage of a destroyed colony ship. Welded to it were dog tags, plasma-scorched medals, and field reports, some written in blood. One plaque read, "Survived 18 days on a dead moon with no oxygen. Killed 2 bounty hunters with a spoon. Graduated top of class." Threxeldar read it twice. He turned to Kincaid. "Is this real?" "All of it." "And you encourage this?" Kincaid looked out across the field, where cadets were now assembling for what appeared to be a mock invasion involving paint grenades and aerial drones shaped like pigeons. "I don't encourage it. I expect it. Earth's not safe. The galaxy's worse. If we want to survive, we train to win ugly." Threxeldar was silent for a long moment. Then he opened his comm and sent a brief message to the Galactic Coalition High Command. "Observation underway. Earth's military methods are illogical, brutal, alarmingly effective. Recommend re-evaluation of planetary threat status." He hesitated, then added one more sentence. "They are not prepared for war. They are preparing to survive the end of one." And somewhere behind them, the cadet named Jerry finally escaped the slime ditch, covered in green, missing one boot but laughing all the way. The first explosion of the day came from the mess hall. Commander Threxeldar had just begun recalibrating his sensory filters when a blast rattled the windows of the administration building. A few tiles fell from the ceiling. No one flinched. General Kincaid sipped her coffee and glanced at the clock. Huh. Right on time. Threxeldar's frills stiffened. You anticipated an explosion? Scheduled stress response training, she replied, standing up and tossing him a flak vest. Today's drill is improvised crisis escalation. That is not a real term. Kincaid smirked. It is here. Outside, cadets scattered across the campus. Sirens howled. Warning lights strobed. A towering plume of smoke rose from the mess hall as a group of cadets dashed out, covered in food, foam, and what appeared to be feathers. One of them yelled, "We lost the chickens. They're loose." Threxeldar's translator chirped urgently, "Warning, ambiguous biological threat detected." "I thought this was a military academy," Threxeldar muttered as they jogged toward the chaos. "Not a farm." Cadets were told to prepare lunch for an ambassador using field rations and local wildlife. We gave them 2 hours and 4 live chickens. I am afraid to ask. Apparently someone tried to deep fry a bird using a repurposed plasma coil and a ventilation shaft. Boom! They arrived at the scene just as a squad of cadets attempted to corral a squawking mass of scorched feathers and rage using a shock baton and a laundry basket. One of them looked up and saluted, still smoking slightly. "Crisis contained, ma'am." "Almost." Kincaid clapped him on the shoulder. "Good hustle. Next time, secure the perimeter before releasing live poultry." "Yes, ma'am." Threxeldar surveyed the devastation. Burned ceiling tiles, collapsed tables, and 2 cadets arguing whether eggs counted as explosive ordnance. "You call this a useful military exercise?" We threw in 3 unrelated objectives mid-drill. Time pressure, unpredictable variables, command breakdown, and biological interference. Perfect training. Especially when nothing goes according to plan. That sounds more like sabotage than strategy. Exactly. She led him away from the mess, brushing soot from her sleeve. "Come on. You haven't seen the Wilderness Dome yet." The dome sat at the far edge of the campus. From outside, it resembled a geodesic greenhouse. Inside, however, it was hell. Temperature, 49 degrees Celsius. Humidity, 92%. Visibility, 15%. Trees, mud. Giant insects, some mechanical, others real. Synthetic predators mimicking alien fauna. Random terrain shift. Spore clouds. Barbed thickets. "I don't see any combat scenarios," Threxeldar said, peering through the observation window. "That's the point," Kincaid said. "We don't give them objectives in here. We drop them, blindfolded, and wait to see how long they survive." "For how long?" 72 hours. No gear. No support. They're graded on creative problem-solving and morale preservation. That's barbaric. That's realistic. As if on cue, a squad emerged from the underbrush dragging an unconscious classmate tied to a sled made of torn uniforms and tree branches. One cadet limped on a splint made from his own rifle. Another had fashioned a breathing mask from socks and leaves. "What happened to that one?" Threxeldar asked, pointing to the unconscious cadet. "Bad batch of nutrient paste. Thought it was edible moss. It wasn't. And yet, they seem in good spirits. They figured out the toxic moss triggers a hallucination that helps spot the simulated apex predator. They call it third eye paste. Are you hearing yourself? I try not to." They continued on, passing the robotics yard. Here, cadets built, battled, and broke their own war machines using scraps from decommissioned ships, old tools, and whatever they could salvage. One group had turned an old coffee machine into a mobile turret. Another had repurposed a hoverboard into a trip mine delivery system. One robot whirred past them carrying a human head, fortunately fake, shouting "Alarm! Intruder detected! Have a nice day!" "That unit has a cheer function?" Threxeldar asked. "Morale bot. The last one shot confetti during suppressive fire. Confused the enemy so badly they surrendered." He blinked all 3 eyelids slowly. I am rapidly approaching the conclusion that Earth's military doctrine is less a strategy and more an ongoing psychological experiment. You're not wrong, Kincaid said. In the adjacent building, the Psychological Warfare Division was in full swing. Threxeldar watched as cadets sat in a dark chamber, subjected to an audiovisual onslaught of enemy propaganda, panic footage, jump scares, and, for some reason, looped recordings of clowns singing lullabies in reverse. A cadet flinched. Another started humming along. Why are they being tortured with this? It's not torture, Kincaid said. It's desensitization. If they can endure this, they won't crack under real stress. Is that cadet drooling? Just a little. He turned to leave but nearly collided with a towering figure in black armor, carrying a sledgehammer and wearing a pink tutu. What in the name of all breathable atmospheres is that? Kincaid nodded respectfully. Drill Sergeant Monroe. Teaches unorthodox combat tactics. In a tutu? Psychological dissonance. The enemy's brain can't reconcile the image. Gives him a 3-second window for a takedown. I am documenting that. Reluctantly. They returned to the command tower, where a live wargame sim was being monitored. On screen, a team of cadets infiltrated a mock enemy base by disguising themselves as cargo delivery staff. One distracted the guards with a box labeled Space Pizza. The others detonated smoke bombs from inside the crate and took control of the base in under 2 minutes. Your students use deception as a primary tactic, Threxeldar noted. You think we can win with brute force? Kincaid replied. We don't have the tech. We don't have the numbers. What we do have is the ability to confuse the hell out of anything with eyes. He thought for a long moment, then asked, So what happens if they fail a training module? Kincaid grinned. They redo it. But harder. She led him to a reinforced sublevel known only as the pit. Inside, failed cadets faced what Earth called adaptive reconditioning, a rematch against their own errors. The room shifted dynamically, analyzing footage of their past performance and generating evolving challenges. One cadet who had frozen during a hostage scenario now faced increasingly bizarre moral dilemmas under pressure, choosing which fake squadmate to save, which asset to destroy, or how to negotiate peace with a drone programmed to insult his mother. This is cruelty, Threxeldar said, watching the cadet flinch at the drone's 7th taunt. It's resilience training, Kincaid said. We tear them down to build something unbreakable. By late afternoon, Threxeldar had grown unusually quiet. He sat in the debrief chamber, watching the footage of the day scroll past him. Students crawling through filth, laughing while handcuffed, shouting joyfully as they leapt from low-altitude dropship. Their teeth gleamed. Their eyes burned. They enjoy this, he finally said. They find joy in agony, humor in chaos, pride in failure. Kincaid sat beside him. That's humanity for you. You can burn our cities, poison our skies, starve our armies, and we'll still find a way to turn it into a joke, a game, a win. It's horrifying. It's why we're still here. He looked back to the footage of the student with the fake pizza, of the slime pit, of the explosion in the mess hall. Every absurdity was layered over something primal, survival instinct, forged into grit and sharpened by sheer madness. You said your cadets prepare for war by surviving the worst. Exactly. And if the worst never comes? She looked him dead in the eye. It will. That's the bet we train to win. His comm pinged again. An incoming message from the coalition. Requesting intermediate findings. Is Earth's training compatible with UGC standard protocol? He looked back at the screen. A new drill was starting. Cadets blindfolded, upside down, hanging from a rig while being quizzed on battlefield ethics. Laughter echoed through the chamber. One shouted, "Do I get bonus points if I vomit on target?" He sent his reply. Negative. Incompatible. Entirely non-standard. Alarmingly effective. Escalating concern. Then he added, "Also, I think I might be laughing." And to his own horror he was. Supreme Commander Threxeldar never imagined he'd find himself flat on his belly, crawling through mud, holding a dull combat knife between his teeth, while being screamed at by a human child in camouflage paint. "Move it, space lizard! Or the clown drone's gonna spot you." The cadet couldn't have been older than 20 Earth years, yet she barked orders with the fury of a seasoned warlord, her voice cutting through the rain like shrapnel. The fake combat scenario had escalated beyond farce and now, somehow, involved enemy drones playing circus music while dropping dye bombs shaped like cream pies. Threxeldar's translator flickered. His scales were streaked with paint, his claws aching, and his dignity in tatters. He spat out the knife and growled, "This is not training. This is performance art with trauma." "Correct," General Kincaid called from behind cover. "But guess what? You're still alive. And those clown drones just failed to locate us because you took cover next to a downed amusement bot. Good instinct." I was hiding from the nightmare laughter. Same thing. The third day of his inspection had gone from surreal to outright hallucinogenic. That morning, he was woken up at 0500 by cadets performing combat karaoke, a ritual where trainees performed battlefield tactics while singing hostile alien anthems to learn enemy rhythm patterns. Someone had yelled, "Let's ambush Tio a waltz." Then came the assault simulation. 36 hours of continuous rotating drills, no scheduled rest, each cadet allowed to sleep only if they convinced the AI command structure that their death wouldn't compromise the mission. Threxeldar, to his horror, had been conscripted as a diplomatic hostage asset and tied to a pole made of crash debris. He was rescued by a cadet who spoke only in limericks and wielded a sharpened crutch. And now, the final simulation, ForgePoint's signature test. Hell Cycle. One continuous, evolving war scenario designed to break every assumption, every comfort, every strategy a soldier might rely on. Threxeldar crouched beside Kincaid in the muddy trench, soaked to the bone, dodging drone bombs and scrambled weather systems controlled by the Academy's chaotic AI, nicknamed Murphy. He shouted over the chaos, "This is a test. This is a war." Kincaid popped up and fired 2 paint rounds at a tower, dropped back down, and grinned. "Exactly. And they never know when it ends. That's the point." Around them, cadets fought, adapted, stumbled, and somehow kept laughing. One used a riot shield as a sled to crash into a bunker. Another rigged a trap using fishing line and a stolen enemy flag. Someone yelled that the cafeteria had been captured and now served only decaf. The collective morale dipped briefly, then exploded into a renewed charge. Threxeldar couldn't believe it. These weren't soldiers, they were chaos incarnate. And they were winning. Even against impossible odds, with environmental hazards, corrupted maps, misinformation, and betrayal scenarios, the cadets pushed forward. No hierarchy held for long. Officers rotated. Plans failed. Command collapsed. But the team didn't fracture. They adapted faster than the simulation could escalate. "Tell me this," he gasped during a lull. "What happens when they finally fail? When their ideas run out? When they can't improvise any further?" Kincaid gave a short, cold laugh. "You're assuming they believe in failure. Around here, failure's just a funny story after they win." Suddenly, a loud klaxon blared across the valley. A voice roared over the comms. "Nuclear sim imminent. Code red. Final stage initiated." A simulated nuke. Threxeldar froze. "They're going to drop a nuclear scenario on cadets?" "Yep," Kincaid said, tightening her gloves. "We're in the blast zone. Let's see what they do." The drone swarm overhead darkened the sky. On the horizon, a massive digital projection of a mushroom cloud began forming. Hell was incoming. Cadets shouted over comms, chaos breaking into desperate coordination. One group began constructing a blast shelter out of ruined transport crate. Another rushed to relocate civilian assets, cardboard cutouts with sad faces drawn on them. A team of medics planted simulated defibrillators across the zone. Threxeldar was about to suggest they retreat when something remarkable happened. The cadets didn't run. They converged. Across the field, disparate squads, rivals, competitors, different training divisions, merged into one unit. They pooled resources, delegated zones, built trenches, reassigned command, and shared rations. It was messy, loud, uncoordinated, and it worked. One cadet, barely 16, stood on a supply crate and screamed, "If we're gonna die, we die smart and stubborn. Bunkers now." And they obeyed. When the simulated blast hit, blinding light, wind shear, sound cannons, the force of it blew Threxeldar off his feet. Darkness. Silence. Then a whistle blew. Kincaid stood tall, covered in mud and what appeared to be pudding. She tapped her earpiece. Simulation complete. Debrief in 5. Threxeldar blinked, stunned. All around him, cadets emerged, limping, panting, laughing. Covered in grime and simulated blood. They whooped and cheered like they'd won the real war. A medical team ran to a cadet who had twisted her ankle. She grinned through tears and said, "I still held the flank. Worth it." Threxeldar rose shakily to his feet. That was unprecedented. They didn't break. They didn't even hesitate. Kincaid nodded. That's Hellcycle. Breaks minds. Builds monsters. He stared out across the carnage. The trenches, the smoldering drones, the chalked outlines of simulated casualties. You created warriors. Kincaid shook her head. We created survivors. Warriors fight. Survivors win. There's a difference. The debrief room buzzed with energy. Cadets joked, argued, and recounted their favorite moment. Whiteboards filled with improvised strategy diagrams, some of which looked like nonsense, until Threxeldar realized one had successfully mapped enemy patrols based on pigeon flight patterns. He watched the footage again. In one simulation, cadets had faked a mutiny to lower enemy alertness. In another, a team used a barbecue grill and solar panel to create a smoke signal that called in a rescue drone. Every failure became fuel. Every disaster a new game. They celebrated chaos and weaponized unpredictability. Not despite the insanity, but because of it. Threxeldar finally understood. They didn't just train for the galaxy's wars. They trained for the ones no one survived. Your methods, he said quietly to Kincaid, are fundamentally incompatible with the coalition. I know. They'd never approve this. Never adopt it. I hope they don't, she replied. Because the day the rest of the galaxy trains like us is the day they finally realize how far behind they are. Silence stretched between them. Then a cadet approached. Commander Threxeldar, she asked. On behalf of the cohort, we wanted to thank you. For what? For not quitting. She held out a small metal token, crudely stamped, scratched, and half-bent. It read, I survived Forge Point, barely. Kincaid grinned. We give it to guests who don't puke. Threxeldar took it slowly. For the first time, he wasn't horrified. He was awed. He looked out one last time as the cadets dispersed, singing some absurd Earth song about surviving nuclear winter with only a spork and a grudge. Then he opened his comm. Final report en route. Conclusion imminent. He hesitated, then typed. Humans are not preparing for war. They are preparing to endure everything that comes after the galaxy loses one. And for the first time in decades, he feared the enemy wasn't waiting beyond the stars. It was already here. And it was singing. Threxeldar didn't speak for the first 10 minutes of the final debriefing. The room was still smeared in simulation grime. Cadets were sprawled across benches, bruised and bandaged, steam rising off their soaked uniforms. One hummed a song while sharpening a spoon into a weapon. Another balanced a sandwich on his nose while reciting tactical doctrines backward. Laughter echoed. Somewhere in the corner, someone was trying to teach a raccoon how to salute. The smell was awful. Threxeldar sat motionless, triple eyelids blinking slowly. His scales had dulled, his translator was on its last coolant cycle, and his diplomatic uniform bore several mystery stains he had stopped trying to identify. On the table before him lay the small metal token they had given him. I survived Forge Point, barely. General Kincaid leaned forward, her arms folded, watching him with that unnerving calm. You've seen everything now, she said. So, final thoughts. He opened his mouth, closed it, then let out a slow exhale through clenched mandibles. I do not know if you are geniuses, or absolute lunatics. Kincaid smiled. That's what we aim for. The rest of the diplomatic envoy sat behind Threxeldar, pale and rattled. Ambassador Nrada of the Oalathai had yet to stop trembling. At one point during the Hell Cycle finale, she had declared she'd rather be devoured by a black hole than ever step foot on Earth again. A junior Vurek lieutenant beside her kept muttering, "They threw a toaster at a tank. They threw a toaster at a tank and it worked." Threxeldar rubbed his temple. I am expected to report back to the Coalition Defense Oversight Council in less than one cycle. They will ask if Earth's forces are prepared for standardized galactic warfare. I am meant to assess how your academies align with Coalition doctrine. And do we? Kincaid asked, unblinking. Absolutely not, he snapped. Your training programs violate every principle of structured readiness. Your cadets are unruly, unpredictable, and in many cases, borderline unhinged. Your drills include psychological torment, dietary hazards, and weaponized household appliances. Your instructors dress like mascots and scream riddles. You force recruits to solve tactical problems using garden tools and jazz music. I witnessed one cadet capture a base by conning the enemy into thinking she was their HR manager. Yep. Valerie. Smart kid. This is not warfare. It's theater performed in a collapsing asylum. Kincaid's smile didn't fade. And yet? He stood, pacing. And yet you win. You win drills, you win joint exercises, you win simulation after simulation that no one else even survives. You create officers who laugh in the face of scenarios that break veteran soldiers. You deploy forces into unwinnable battles, and they don't just survive, they monologue while doing it. He turned, three eyes narrowing. Your entire species is designed to terrify anything logical. You're chaos with a flag. You're welcome, Kincaid said. A low rumble of laughter rippled through the cadets behind her. But Threxeldar wasn't done. I reviewed over 500 hours of archived ForgePoint footage last night. You know what disturbed me most? She raised an eyebrow. The duct tape railgun? No. The failure logs. The ones where your cadets die in sim after sim. I watched them lose airlocks, crash into moons, get dismembered, disoriented, even vaporized. And you know what they do after each simulation ends? Debrief. They argue over snacks. They joke. They write songs about it. One of them failed 14 consecutive simulations and still walked into the 15th whistling. Yeah, that's Marco. He's got nerves like tungsten. Is he still alive? No idea. He parachuted into an active volcano for extra credit yesterday. What? Don't worry. We gave him heat-resistant armor. Probably. Threxeldar sank back into his chair, defeated. This academy has redefined the boundaries of madness. But I understand now. I truly do. Oh. I used to believe military strength came from order, discipline, unity through precision. But Earth thrives in entropy. You make unpredictability into strategy. You weaponize humor, suffering, and failure. You turn every flaw into a feature. Every defeat into a punchline. You don't ignore chaos. You marry it. Kincaid tilted her head. Careful. You're starting to sound like one of us. He glanced at the cadets again. One had balanced a bucket on his head and declared himself General of Tactical Hydration. No one questioned it. Another had built a working miniature mortar from cafeteria utensils. May the stars protect us if you ever decide to train the rest of the galaxy. At that, Kincaid finally stood, walked around the table, and placed a hand on his shoulder. We don't want to train the galaxy, Commander. We just want the galaxy to understand one thing. What's that? When the worst comes, the real worst, not some neat little war with rules, when the sky is falling and your ships are burning and nothing makes sense anymore, Earth will still be fighting. With duct tape and jokes and sheer spite. We'll be bleeding, laughing, and making up new rules halfway through. And if you're lucky, we'll still be on your side. Threxeldar looked up at her, and, despite himself, he believed it. A calm ping echoed in the room. Threxeldar tapped his wrist device. The Coalition Defense Council's transmission blinked across the screen. Final report request. Is Earth's military culture safe, replicable, and fit for integration into the Galactic Coalition's standardized defense strategy? He stared at it. He looked back at the cadets. One was juggling stun grenades. Another was taking bets on who could eat the most hot sauce before passing out. A third was sketching potential base designs that included inflatable bounce castles as misdirection. He turned back to the console and typed slowly. No. He paused. It is neither safe nor replicable, nor in any way aligned with our doctrine. Another pause. It is something far more dangerous, effective. He hit send. And for the first time in his career, he didn't feel horror. He felt hope. Because in a galaxy full of cold calculation, sterile academies, and simulations run by sanitized logic, Earth reminded him of the one thing everyone else had forgotten. War wasn't fair. It wasn't clean. It wasn't winnable by statistics alone. Sometimes the winning side wasn't the one with the best plan. It was the one too stubborn, too unhinged, too human to lose. He stood to leave. At the exit, a cadet handed him a shirt. On it, crudely printed, I toured Forge Point and all I got was PTSD and this dumb shirt. Threxeldar smiled. And took it anyway. As the shuttle departed, rising into Earth's polluted atmosphere, he glanced down at the campus one last time. Cadets ran across the field. Explosions punctuated the air. Laughter echoed louder than gunfire. And deep within the chaos, he knew. If the galaxy ever burned, Earth would be the last planet still laughing in the smoke.